So one day, I was just scrolling on social media, to cope. That's when I came across this video.
Tower, bro.
Oh, it actually does look like it. Alright, I need some.
Okay, this might be the easiest test of my life. First of all, you got a very American look.
As the edges of obsidian are as sharp or sharper than a surgeon's scalpel. Many of these large chunks that I am knocking off will be further refined and chipped into spearheads and smaller arrowheads. As the obsidian piece becomes more refined, I use an elk antler to strike large pieces off and make it thinner. I wanted to test to see if this piece of wood closer to the finished spearhead shape. I use a deer antler to strike smaller pieces off. Finished spearhead, and these are all the pieces of obsidian that I knocked off the large chunk.
And I just moved on with my life. Until a couple weeks later, I was trying to find a topic for my inquiry question, and I came across something on my textbook. It's the same idea, so I just thought, ooga booga, I can use this idea as the topic for my inquiry question. So that's how I decided to research these tools for my inquiry project. I'm going to do some research on how these techniques work, and I guess work out my inquiry question from there. It'll take what, like an afternoon? So, it's been a week. I seem to have lost the suit that I stole from my dad. That's probably not a good thing. I'm sure that's bad. Anyways, here's what I learned. So say you have this chunk of obsidian, right? The first peoples often use not rocks, but volcanic glass, like obsidian, because they are more brittle and easier to chip. By using tools to strike the obsidian and letting it flake off naturally, it would split on the atomic level and create extremely sharp edges, 400 times sharper than the metal tools of the stinky Europeans. So anyways, you take this chunk of obsidian and you strike it around its edge using either a rock, which has got the hard hammer, or a deer antler, which has got the soft hammer. This technique not only shapes the chunk into a triangular shape to use as tools, it also helps making it thinner, turning this gross hunk of glass into a tool of mass homicide. And the shards that you strike off aren't entirely wasted either, as the larger bits could be used to make, for example, arrowheads. When this chunk of obsidian has been disfigured into something that somewhat resembles, say, a spearhead, they would use the smaller end of the deer antler to chip off little indentations on the edge of the blade, making it serrated, like a shark's teeth or a bread knife. They would then attach it to a wooden shaft using pine tar as glue. They used deer sinew, which is like muscle fibers, to wrap the blade to the wood. And the cool thing about this dead animal part is that it contracts as it dries, binding the blade to the handle. And now you have the spear, or arrow, or knife, or general cutting tool that you can use to hunt animals, engage in warfare, or sell on eBay. Now I have to do some research on the applications of these tools. So basically how they were used in the past. Hopefully it won't take as long this time though. How long can a person go without sleep? My impending doom aside, let's talk about rocks. So for this project, I decided to focus on the Haida people. The Haida people are an indigenous group that inhabits an archipelago off the coast of British Columbia called the Haida Gwaii. Flaked obsidian spearheads have been found deep in the caves of the Haida Gwaii, dating as far back as 7,000 years ago. They would use these tools to hunt as well as, commit mass genocide. But we'll get on that later. For now, let's focus on the hunting part. The first peoples used a variety of weapons to hunt with, all tipped with sharp bits of volcanic glass. The earliest to develop was the spear. It could be used in melee combat, but for hunting it was mostly thrown. This made the spear inefficient compared to other weapons when airborne, being unwieldy and slower in the air due to its weight. Next came the darts, which were much more suited to be projectiles. However, darts are still restricted because you have to throw them by hand. Granted, they tried to improve this efficiency by crafting what are known as, oh god, I have to pronounce this, atlatos, which are basically extensions to the human arm in order to throw darts with more force, cause of the longer lever. Next came the bow and arrow, the pinnacle of technology, until Europeans brought rifles. The bows stored more potential energy than the human arm, and arrows were easier to make than spears, as well as reusable. The Haida also used stone flake tools to make, for example, knives to skin their hunts. The Haida could be compared to the Vikings based on their bloodthirst and belligerence. They used canoes to engage in combat on water as well as on land against other tribes to pillage materials and items symbolic of wealth. In battle, the Haida used mainly bows and arrows, of course tipped with obsidian stone heads. Then the Europeans arrived and they brought guns, which completely took over the indigenous battlefields, but that's kind of boring. In melee combat, they used obsidian daggers, but these soon became obsolete and evolved to become decorative symbols of status for chiefs. I want to go on a bit of a tangent here, but because I phrased this question around stone tools, this is technically on topic. When the Haida engaged in naval warfare, they would use these heavy stone rings with rope made of plant fiber tied around them to smash their opponent's canoes. By tying this rope, they could reel it back in after throwing this donut of death at their enemies, and I think that's pretty awesome. The techniques used to create flake stone tools are still practiced today, although the reasons are traditional instead of practical. These tools, although sharp, are not durable enough to be produced practically and unable to be produced industrially. Nevertheless, artists create weapon heads for aesthetic purposes out of rare materials such as colored obsidian. The main reason why I picked this topic for my inquiry project, the influencer Lava Blades, that I saw show off the process of creating these tools, and I found the connection between my coursework and my recommended feed very interesting. His content is entirely centered around the techniques to create these tools out of glass, such as sapphire, which had similar properties to obsidians, but a brighter color. I tried to extend my research into the more warlike side of the Haida people, because I did not expect the indigenous people to participate in conflict. However, I found myself more drawn to the techniques and craftsmanship involved in creating the flake stone tools. I still have some curiosities regarding my inquiry question that I have not yet answered. For example, I started on a path of exploring the past and present because I was under the impression that these stone tools are used in ceremonies. But I could not find anything about that, and that question still plagues me to this day. I also could not find more detailed descriptions of the techniques used to creating these blades. What I was most curious about was how can the craftsman predict how the material would flake off to create the correct shape. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna go get some sleep now. That's a lie, I have so much editing to do. Crazy, play yourself, funky.